I would probably say Generation Z, but Pavan, I would like to start with you. What's the actual situation at the moment politically in Nepal, and also how is the media covering it? There's kind of established media, and then there's this whole Gen Z influencer kind of thing going on. So could you give us just a broader picture of what's happening?
Sure, Eric. I think before saying what's happening right now, I should go back a little bit on what happened exactly a month ago. It's September 8th is when the protest began. It was triggered by a ban on social media, but really there was, very deep-seated dissatisfaction among the youth about corruption and nepotism. And that sort of the ban triggered this protest. Um, right after the ban, the weekend, there were so many calls over TikTok and tech savvy people who were using other social media platforms anyways. So there was very big call for young people to come together. And in the morning when we met with the protesters, we had no inclination of what was to come the week ahead, really, to be honest. Um, Started off as a peaceful process, but protest, but eventually, it became quite violent from the state side as well as from the protesters. But on the first day, we saw 19 young protesters being killed when the security forces retaliated, them coming into a restricted area close to the parliament. And they used, water cannons, rubber bullets, but eventually also live ammunition, in which we saw um, very young protesters, even in school uniforms, being killed. That, of course, made people very angry. So on the second day, there were protests in the first day as well across the country, but the second day it definitely escalated. Even though at the end of the first day, we saw the ban being lifted and the home minister resigning. So the protests intensified into riots, demonstrations. Demonstrators stormed government buildings, parliament, Supreme Court, residences of politicians were torched, businesses were attacked, and around the noon, the prime minister resigned, which may have been, it's a very quick uprising, like result-oriented uprising. By the afternoon, the prime minister had resigned, the government toppled, but still the vandalism continued into the night, and eventually the army took over the controls, around 10 at night. After that, we've now have an interim government led by Prime Minister Sushila Karki. She is a former Chief Justice, and her name actually came from the Gen Z protesters. And her name came through a Discord discussion and election, which also, I think is quite interesting.
Can you I mean, one thing that struck me about the whole thing was they banned 26 social media. I know TikTok and Instagram. How many other social media were they using in Nepal? And also Discord. I know about Discord, but why did Discord play? If you look at any articles, if you read about social media, nobody ever talks about Discord. So why is Discord such a thing in Nepal, particularly?
I think rather than being a thing in Nepal, it was the fact that the young people were organized there. And Discord is primarily used for gaming. And to be honest, I only learned how to use it a month ago, and I still don't have the complete hang of it. So it's a very young space, and that's where when there was a ban on social media, people were already organizing in Discord platforms. So that, I guess, eventually allowed them to use Discord for this conversation. It also, compared to other social media, is quite versatile and is able to bring like many people together in a single conversation. I think that might also be the reason.
Were there any actual Nepalese national social media platforms? I mean, apart from we know all the big tech
Right.
platforms, but there were any
There was
homegrown
one.
ones?
There was one in the list that the government banned. It was called Hamrapatro. It's actually a calendar app, but it has many other services as well. And they were eventually opened because they moved to register.
Rajneesh, you were on the ground, right? You were out. What was it like covering it? You said also that sometimes it was quite threatening to be a journalist on the ground. So could you maybe give us 5 minutes of what it was actually like to cover these protests?
Thanks, Eric. Great to have you here, and it's really an honor to be on this panel with the Nepal chapters. Like we recently started our Nepal chapter, and here we are with the panel. So much is unexpected here in Nepal. How things fold up and things move. As Paavan was mentioning, the whole thing happened in 30 hours, right? 30 hours of uprising that toppled the government. So on the first hour, I was right on the street covering the protest, and I had no idea how this protest is going to turn around. Like my initial, thing was just to take pictures, to interview people, to take videos, bites, and talking with people. And it started at 9 a.m. as Pawan was mentioning, and then slowly the crowd, the protesters, they start marching from Maitigar. That's a popular street for protest. That they start marching towards the Parliament building. There were some barricades, but the barricades were pushed, and slowly the protesters started entering inside the Parliament on the first day. It was quite difficult scenario. The tear gases were fired. It was something I was not expecting that would happen on that day, on that moment. And I think the safety of was a prime concern. On the first day, four journalists were hit. They were injured with rubber bullets. A few were taken with hospitals, and even the photojournalism journalist colleagues were actually carrying them and sending them to the hospitals, which was quite unique to see. Like journalists and photojournalists were supporting each other's during the need. So that was a big chaos at the time. The first day we had like 17 casualties right in front of the parliament out there, and it turned out quite violent. I was still there at 10 p.m. On the first day doing live coverages and reportings out there. There are a few like hospitals nearby. The situation was very chaotic, though the curfew was being imposed in the afternoon. Like no one was actually obeying it. The first day passed, and it was quite uncertain night. I actually could not sleep. On that evening, I was actually doing interviews and coverages till midnight and things, and it was quite difficult to sleep as well because of how things went out, especially students on the school uniforms, young kids, the Gen Zs, they were shot right in front of the parliament. So it was quite difficult to distill the situation. So the second day, we had no idea how things will come up. What's were there. I was in the live team of the BBC at the moment, and the bureaus were sending more people to come to Kathmandu, but only one person could land, and after that the airports were closed, so many of the colleagues had to return back. Many especially buildings were burned in that afternoon. I think the first thing was safety. The main thing was to be safe and also to care about the colleagues I was working with. We were nearly attacked. Our vehicle was nearly vandalized, but we're lucky to pull that vehicle to a kind of like passage that went through the garage of a hospital. We parked it there, and then we started reporting. Every back and there, the protest was moving from one side to another side. We had to sometimes move with them, sometimes come outside and just be safe. Many tear gases were fired. And it was quite difficult to report at the moment as well, because there was some sort of like things that the protesters were saying, like how the media reported. They were saying the media reported the protest started because of the social media ban. But the JNG protester was saying the protest started to fight against corruption, and that's how they wanted to be reported. And as a journalist on field, wearing the press jacket out there, just trying to calm them down, and then to interview them, and to report, to take pictures, to the videos. It was one of the most chaotic thing I've ever done. I've covered Nepal for the last 20 years. I covered the 2006 April moment as well. That moment lasted for 19 days, but this one happened in 30 hours. And in the 30 hours, the prime minister resigned. And as Paavan was mentioning, after the resignation of the prime minister, all the security personnel pulled off. Like there was no police on the ground. All the buildings, all the major buildings, especially the parliament, the Supreme Court, the main government buildings, other government buildings were also being burned. And there was this sense of uncertainty, sense of lawlessness, and other things that was mushrooming. And like my job as a journalist was to cover the moment, to report as things were happening. I was there on the second day in front of Parliament when the Parliament was being burned. We were also doing live coverage till the midnight, and it was quite difficult to return home as well. My place is not far from where the protest was happening, but there was no sense of security to return back from that location. So we ended up staying in a hotel that was nearby. So that was quite different and unexpected events that circled last month. So this was on just a month back, Eric.
Was one thing you told me was hostility towards the press. I mean, you hear about a Gen Z revolution, and it sounds like all these young people, good spirits, whatever. But we talked yesterday, and I think journalists were under attack, and you said particularly Indian journalists were being targeted, right?
Yes, especially Indian journalists were targeted, and we could see the kind of like this kind of, especially like they're not happy how the news was being covered by the Indian press. And I think it was also basically how things were reported in, I would not say the all of the Indian press, but some of the Indian press. Like some there was a lot of like misinformation and disinformation in the press as well. For example, there was this report saying that the wife of former prime minister was killed. Instead, she was actually in hospital being treated. Like our job was first to call and fact check, which was not happening, and also the narratives, how things were going on. So which created a kind of like tension, with the Indian press, especially. Uh, on the second day, which the protesters were not happy on this, and also like on how the reporting were done, especially especially the traditional or the majority media outlets. The Some of the media outlets in Nepal were burned, especially the major media outlets like the Kantipur Media Group. The building was burned. Another building in Tinkune was also burned. So that was kind of dissatisfaction among the protesters on media, which they have to be supportive on press freedom, and how journalists should be reported. So I think press freedom and journalistic rights should be a kind of basic rights and human rights, where journalists should be able to report on difficult scenarios, which we're not seeing those things on those events, Eric.
And Prabesh, welcome.
Thank you,
So,
Eric.
yeah, good to see you. So
You
we've
too.
been talking about the kind of general situation, and
Mhm.
Rajneesh was talking about what it was like on the ground. So what's your assessment of the coverage of this amazing, youth-driven revolution? I mean, it's been characterized as a Generation Z or Z revolution, but you know, journalists like to simplify things or put labels and things. Is it that simple? Was it just that generation, that young generation, or was it a broader protest? What's your analysis of what happened?
Frankly telling you, Eric, I'm still not settled down. My mind is still processing. So many things happened so quickly, so uncertain. So, there were so many things involved so quickly. So, uh, some of the things are already explained by Rajneesh and Paavan, but, we have to be clear that the protest was not planned and anticipated this sort of result, not only from the individual like us, but also even from the protester and even from the government. It was not assessed and not assumed to be this sort of massive scale, And the primary and very broad demand they were demanding was corruption free, less corruption in the governance. And that was quite obvious, and it's happening everywhere. And the another fueling reason was, the social media ban that you were already mentioned. Uh, but interestingly, the day one was quite peaceful. When the government turned violent, it killed the innocent children, and uncertain things started happening. And the player in the background, those were many political forces, many other interest group. They utilized the situation, vulnerable situation, and they grabbed the opportunity to destroy the environment in their own favor. So that was the primary cause of the major vandalism and major violence we observed. And moving to the role of media, very sadly, the mainstream media missed the great opportunity to prove that they are the real source of truth and fact information, not only the local media, even the international, well reputed media. They were highly relied on misinformation. I just spotted that the Independent from UK, they utilize AI generated manipulating image in their reporting. Similarly, so many Indian news uh, televisions and online media, they use AI generated videos, and they cover conspiracies in their own favor, and that was so frustrating, and that was so uncertain and unpredictable environment for the common people. And even the local news organization, for example, National News Agency, which is the strong information provider for the so many news organization in country and across the globe, they they distributed the news saying that the wife of former prime minister is dead. She is born, but eventually it identified she was just injured, and now she's almost back to the fully cover. So it happens, and what I say is it was the big failure of organized so-called legacy and managed media. And I was observing the uh, Discord conversation of Gen Zs, and they were announcing quite frequently, do not follow mainstream medias, do not follow mainstream medias, only rely on the social media accounts, what we operate ourselves, right? That means the news organization is losing young population, young generation, and it will take time and cost to recover that. That is my assessment.
Pavan, you work for an AFP, as I do, and covering these events in real time. How did you decide what to report to the world, right? How did you decide, as Prabesh said, when there was you know, disinformation, misinformation online. I mean, disinformation is you know, intentionally spreading fake news, you know. Misinformation is just people spreading stuff that's not necessarily, you know, it's not necessarily you know, malevolent, but you know, just not true. And then there's also you have the artificial intelligence aspect to it. So working for a big news organization like AFP, where you know, as you know well, that our standards are accuracy, seek the truth. How do you, in a chaotic situation like that, you know, how do you decide when to push the button? When do you decide this is verified news and when it's you think, nah, I'm not going to report this?
Right.
What were the procedures in the
Mm.
bureau? I mean, Paavan is the AFP bureau chief in Nepal, and we have a long-standing bureau there. Kidaman Singh, who was a legend, who's great
Right.
respect for this man for many years in Nepal.
Mm.
So Paavan is, you know, Nepal has always figured very highly in AFP's sort of respect. So, but how do you decide in a chaotic situation like that? What do you report? Don't you report?
Yeah. You're so right to describe it as chaotic because, you know, within 30 hours, so much changed. Back to back, there were events happening, and we were following them as much as we could.
Mm,
The most important thing is we had people on the ground.
right.
I was there partly, but we had people who were covering for video and photos on the ground throughout the day. That was a very, very important source of information. Um, Rightfully, there was a lot of like you know, misinformation and disinformation coming out, but we were checking our sources, triple checking our sources for anything. There were so many different news coming out. Like the one that's very now, you know, give an example of is the former prime minister's wife's passing away, being, you know, burnt alive in his house. That was very widely reported, and we confirmed with several sources, tried to see if it was true, and it was not. Another thing that was reported that after the prime minister resigned, the president had also resigned. This was on, unfortunately, again on an Indian television channel. Um, and at that point, I was speaking to his press advisor, trying to get the latest, you know, because after the political, you know, leadership vacuum, we were expecting the president to say something. So I was speaking with his advisor, and he was like, "No, there's no plan to resign as of now." So we were sticking to one, official sources, uh, even the police for the, you know, number of deaths and stuff. Then we were speaking with people on the ground, the Gen Z protesters that we had fortunately made links with on the first day of the protest, like early on when it was still peaceful. We had spoken to several of them. So speaking to key people in the Gen Z protest, and then of course our own people on the ground were super important. So
And
despite of
how
all the, you know,
how do
all the
you think?
noise,
Yeah.
we had to filter out and make sure whatever was on paper was when we filed, it had to be, you know, go through several checks. And our editors in Delhi also really helped to, you know, give us that room.
And I mean, it's just, as I said, I mean, it's an easy headline, Gen Z protesters overthrow the government in Nepal, but it's not homogenous, is it? So is there a voice? How do you cover this? I don't think it's been kind of categorized as a youth Gen Z or Gen Z movement, but I don't think it's a homogenous movement. How do you cover it? Who are the
I agree.
spokespeople?
I agree with you, but the people who led the protests were definitely Gen Z. Even within the protests, when the demonstrators were getting together, there were many who were older. So Gen Z is under 28. That's very young. There were older people, even in the initial gathering, but
I'm
they
not,
were like,
I just missed that one
yeah.
by about
And they were
50
like,
years.
this is their protest and we're here to support them.
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, as the protest progressed, many other people joined. And Pravesh obviously, has very clearly talked about, there are other people who took advantage of that vulnerability. On the second day, we saw on the streets many people who sort of knew the tactics of, running a protest, setting a house on fire. These are not things that normal young person knows how to do. And there were definitely people on the ground who were feeding into this chaos. Another thing is that also there were a lot of jailbreaks. On the second day, more than 13,000 prisoners escaped, many of them also to save their lives because the station was on fire. And several have also voluntarily returned. But there were people with criminal records on the street as well. And many police stations were also looted. So their guns were looted, their uniforms were looted. So it's very hard to say who was in the group on the second day, especially because there were so many different people with different interests, and there are many theories. There are conspiracy theories. I guess now that we have an investigation commission in place, we'll see a more detailed look into it or a more official take on this. But definitely, it was not just Gen Z, and they themselves have said that there were infiltrators who incited violence.
Rajneesh, you were out on the ground. I mean, how much of the information you were getting was firsthand and how much of it was through social media and what were your sources and how did you check?
Yeah, Eric, like that's a great question. So like basically being in the field just locates you to certain areas that you could cover, and then not to other locations. What is happening, because on the second day, it is happening everywhere all around Nepal, and then information was coming of being like houses being burned, the government buildings being burned. So the main thing was getting in touch with the press advisors, the press contacts, and people who are there, and then trying to fact check the information. As like we talked about the wife of former prime minister. There was another news about the finance minister being attacked, and there's a video coming out, and social media and Indian media and other media ways were actually showcasing those videos. So my thing was like I just called the press guy and said like, is this correct? The press guy happens to be a person I know. So it's always good to fact check and get the information
But can you
from
trust this person? Can you trust this person?
but that's a great question, whether to trust the person who was saying that. But as he happens to be the press coordinator, press advisor of the finance minister, what I could say is that though like his press advisor says, this is not the right video. So and then in a couple of days we knew that it was not the finance minister, but it was actually a owner of a different hospital. The hospital was actually supporting the protesters. So it was definitely difficult to, as you mentioned, to fact check and get those information. And it was not simple information coming up, like TikTok videos coming through all the protesters. Like everyone was filming. They were actually, doing live stream. They were actually doing it. And the fear was like, what if some of the videos are AI generated? I think that was quite difficult, and I think it's quite difficult to actually fact check those information with that much of intensity, that much of protest happening all over Nepal, and so many people are actually like tweeting it, actually doing videos, live streaming. So it was quite difficult to fact check those things that was happening, and on top of that, the internet was not working well as well on that day, because people were assembling in a single location. Everyone was using internet, so that means there will be overcrowd. There will be and the speed was not well. And even if I use a VPN, it was not working well as well. So it was quite a difficulty to report those, especially 2 days, especially the second day. It was difficult, and also the safety aspect was quite important to do, because like many journalists, they were even afraid to say they are journalists to show the press card as well. So it was that situation where when we reported on those days. Yeah, Eric.
Prabesh, what's your kind of overall assessment of the coverage if you look at the challenges that Rajneesh talked about with the disinformation, AI, social media, traditional media, AFP, obviously, big international news organizations. Do you think how would you assess the coverage? Was it on balance representative of actually what happened, or do you think it was simplified? Because journalists are very bad at one of the terrible things about journalists is they like to simplify situations. They have a narrative. So it's Gen Z, young people against these corrupt Nepos. You call them Nepos, right? Or Nepos, all these spoiled kids, and the guy with his picture of all his Louis Vuitton Christmas presents or whatever it was. So do you think that the coverage reflected the reality, Prabesh?
Hmm.
Or did it just follow a kind of comfortable narrative fed by social media? Or what's your feeling about the coverage?
It's easy to understand that, even for the very resourceful media organization, it was not quite easy to instantly make decision and travel anywhere in the every corner of country and cover everything what is happening. But it's not that acceptable, the in the meaning of not having the proper information. It's not acceptable to disseminate misinformation or disinformation, right? So it's pretty bad that even so-called international news organization, they cover with so mess, so mess, and it was full of sensation. And that's why we have to rethink about the where the media, legacy media, are heading to. So the first of all, I'm not personally satisfied with the media coverage did from the legacy media organization. And of course, social media is always sensitive, and that is the form of amateur content production and dissemination channel. So it was always critical, and that was the right time for the sinking media environment to get their position back by providing right information and providing trustful information. But we missed that chance, right? So, and another thing, if you see from the positive side, it is the big lesson. It is the big lesson for future. And the media organizations should consider them. They are missing the inspiration of huge population. They are not connected to the big population, vibrant population. So they have to change their strategies. They have to rethink their um, organization and setups, and that gonna be the positively resulted in the future. That can be the optimistic point, I guess. And it's out of your question maybe, but what I see the positive aspect of the protest is the population, so-called Gen Z population, was widely neglected from the political actors, and they were known for passive citizens of nation. They were mostly engaged with smartphones and gaming, and uh, tech savvy, and highly engaged with the devices, and they were not that much conscious about the social political things happening in their surroundings. But I realized that after this revolution, you say, the revolution at this moment, that population is taking their responsibility gradually. Even the 1 month, so many things, the positive things are happening, and new leaders with some sense of maturity is burning from that mass, and that is the optimistic part. And if democracy gets stronger, media will also get the stronger space.
One thing that struck me though is that it was a youth movement, but the prime minister, I think that they basically elected via Discord is, I think she's the same age as me. They didn't choose a young person.
Exactly, it was not
How's that?
it was not the typical kind of political movement. The preparation goes for a long time. They organize their committees and share their manifestos, share their ideologies, and make a control by the leader. They form the leadership, and that sort of things never happened. It was very uncertain, and even the protesters were not predicting that the government will fall down, and they have to take the responsibility of this big responsibility. That's why they couldn't choose the leader from their own age group, and that's why they have to select the most accepted figure but not aligned to any political party. That's why the former Supreme Court Chief Justice was their best choice. And the background of the this prime minister was the anti-corruption advocate, and that was the plus point to be a good candidate, right? And even we still see the struggle to find other leaders. We have so many ministries are in vacuum, and there is no appropriate minister, appropriate leader to lead those ministries. That's why it's gonna be some struggling days in days ahead.
Pavan, I mean, you work for an international news agency, and you looked at the local coverage. How do writing about the situation in Nepal, how do you write it for an international audience? Without, as I said, I mean, we have these kind of, Nepal, Everest, and all the rest of it. Nobody expected this to happen. So, how, as a journalist, and we have young journalists obviously watching, how do you sell this story? How do you make it interesting for an international audience without just going into like stereotypes? How do
Right.
you cover it, and what was the feedback you got?
Mhm. I think, of course, it's the context is universal. The context of this uprising was universal. Uh, Corruption, it's something that many countries suffer from. And there had been protests ahead of us, like in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, and in Indonesia, which, there were common
Local.
threads that we could use in Nepal as well. So it wasn't just Nepal, it was the context of young people rising up against old leaders who are, disconnected from them and are also enjoying uh, I'll go back to like the Nepo Kid videos that you mentioned, these were sons and daughters of politicians who were enjoying a very lavish life and expensive trips. And what that represented was what the old leaders have stolen from the young generation, the opportunities and struggles the lack of opportunities and struggles that they're facing is because of that. So that I think is universal. And that's why I think uh, so many people connected with this as well. This was, top story for so many days. And there's still so much interest in what's going to happen now because the context of this is universal. And the fact, I think, is also because a result was obtained so quickly, like, in 30 hours, as Rajneesh said. Uh, that's quite unique as well. So a protest that was spontaneous, that was decentralized, was able to do something that, even 10 years of Maoist insurgency was not able to do quite, like it took them, quite considerable time to change the political scenario. So I think people were able to connect with those facts.
I mean, of course, in Hong Kong, they had the protest in 2019, which ended up with a national security law, which just crushed everything. And
Mhm.
the level of violence, there was violence, but, there were petrol bombs on one side and there were rubber bullets and tear gas on the other side, but it wasn't as I mean, as far as I remember, nobody was actually killed. There was a couple of
Mm.
people shot. Um, Rajneesh, when you were out covering it, did you know that's one thing that struck me was the level of violence. I mean, people getting killed. I mean, this wasn't just a regular kind of everybody's fed up and protesting. I mean, they were using well, live ammunition and they were killing people. And were you shocked by that? Did you expect it? Or
Yeah, I think it was quite surprising because I covered the 2006 April moment as well, right? And if we compare these two moments, like that happened 20 years back and 20 years now, the intensity had changed, right? In 2006, I was covering, especially, this is this political party, we call it the Seven Party Alliance, and the Maoists, they were together, and they launched this April moment. But in this 2025, the protest was a kind of we call it GenZ, but we did not see a leader in the protest. Like they were different groups coming up, but they say we are leaderless and a very organic protest. So which was quite interesting to see. Like I've been covering so many protests, out here, and to have this like leaderless concept was something different. And also the methods of mobilization was unique, like Eric, like one thing is in 2006, there was like street marches, pamphlets, FM radios were widely used. Social media was not that much, active and popular in 2005, 6. But if you look at 2025, as Paavan was mentioning, Discord, like this channel now has like 170,000 users. That's just a single server that hosts the Youth Against Corruption in Nepal. And then now they've stopped, like new people cannot join it. They have to be verified. They have to be brought through a different channel. So the way of how protests are being organized has subsequently changed, using hashtags, it's live streaming, it's online petitions, using AI, spamming, and also the hashtags. Like things have changed, in the 20 years. So that was quite different. And also the violence, as you mentioned, we didn't have so much of casualties, even in 2006, even during the 19 days protest. But now, like within 2 days, I was just pulling the records earlier, from the police. They said like nearly 75 people died during the 2 days long protest. So the use of violence, from the police was also like that was not quite what we were expecting, or we were actually anticipating that could happen. Young kids, students being shot right in front of the parliament. That was not something happening. And also the second day's violence, where the Supreme Court being burned. We're not expecting that. The parliament being burned, and the major government buildings being burned. That was, I think I, as a journalist, was not anticipating. I was not thinking that might happen, but like we covered as it was happening. So that was, something quite different, which I had covered in the past. And as Prabesh was mentioning, where are we heading now? The question, as Pavan was also mentioning, where are we heading now? Where Nepal heads? As Prabesh was mentioning, the government, the interim government is not fulfilled. Like he said, we have eight ministers, still three. They said there will be 11 ministers, but still we're still waiting for the completion of this, like the cabinet. And also like though the election is being declared for March 2026. All the political parties are not saying that they will contest for the elections. There seems to be a lot of division within the GenZ groups. There have been more GenZ groups that are coming up. So the situation right now is not settled. That, as Pravesh was mentioning, in the first thing, like I'm still trying to think up what's coming up, what's going on. Like that's the situation for us. Like where are we heading? Every day, new things come up, new ways of dealing things will come up. So it's not a kind of normalcy where we say like where this is the future, this is how it looks like. We are still in the process. I think the GenZ uprising is not yet over. That's what I think. The 2 days are over, but what they're trying to achieve, especially the anti-corruption, and also like what they're trying to achieve, it's still in the process. and we're still trying to document as things go on. So my job as an investigative journalist and editor is not just to report how things move on, also to report how why things were happening, who was doing it, what type of bullets were being used, and all those things. We're still on working on this story, as Eric.
And we've got a question from Gwen Teal. For the journalists, how did you protect yourself from or navigate the violence reporting on the ground? And for the editors, how did you balance overseeing reporters on the ground, chasing stories, ensuring their safety? So Pavan, this is a big thing at ARP, isn't it? I mean, I always say that, our editorial priorities are accuracy and seek the truth, but the practical priority is safety. So how did, and Nepal day to day wasn't a dangerous place to cover. It's not Gaza, obviously. So how did you gear up for that? Rajneesh and Prabesh, feel free to add. I mean, when you went out in the morning, did you have flak jackets and helmets, or how did you cover it?
Not in the morning,
Right,
not when we first went out.
right.
But as we've already said, this was such a decentralized, organic protest that came together. There were very different narratives. There were some groups that wanted to stop before the restricted area. That was the plan. There were others who were planning to push across the barricade. So we were anticipating some violence. So our photographers and videographers, had their helmets on and had their tear gas mask with them.
Hmm.
But we really were, uh, not anticipating the scale of the violence that took
Mhm.
place. I was
Did you,
then
did
reporting
any of
on.
the reporters, did you feel they were targeted?
Our videographer did say that on the second day, when we couldn't say who was on the ground, it
Hmm.
was a very threatening space.
Right. Okay.
And people were would some people did come up to him, try to get his camera or try and like
Really?
threaten him,
Hmm.
but he was able to move away from that. So, and Rajneesh rightfully said that it was very chaotic on the second day,
Hmm.
and we didn't know what kind of people were on the ground, and it was threatening situation for journalists as well.
Prabesh, there's been a couple of, if I can put two questions together, basically, what does this new government mean for Nepal? This is Zella, who's our AAJA-Asia president, sent us a message, and another question about the Gen Z movement led to the fall of the government, but we get elections in March. So what's the situation now? I mean, are we in a, is it stabilized with the new PM or the interim PM? And as we've said in this discussion, it's not a very homogenous movement, even though it's kind of got this Gen Z label. So Prabesh, how do you see the current political situation and what can we expect running up to the elections?
It's quite early to predict because
Mhm.
we have to see how the government function because they are not experienced political actors, and although they are well renowned in their own field, that's why it seems they're widely accepted even from the political parties. They say it's okay, it's okay, it's not too bad, and we have
Mhm.
to go back to the regular democratic process, and for a short period of time it's fine to consider because of it was not the regular thing happened to our country. But you know there is massive divisions within the political parties, within the social groups, within the interest foreign and other sort of groups. So it's not clear, and you cannot say who gonna take the ways and who gonna lead the power. That's why it's quite early to predict, but we hope democratic process get back to the track through the
Mhm.
election, and the leadership of this interim government so far is doing its good job, but it has pretty challenges to uh, follow the voices raised by the Gen Z groups, and at the same time maintaining the relation with the legacy political party, bringing them to the election process is very, very challenging.
Yes.
And yeah, we're in the middle of the crossroad.
Pavan, going forward, we're going to finish up. Um, how do you cover this process leading up to the elections? Who are you talking to? Who do you talk to the government? Do you talk to the Gen Z people? I mean, who do you talk to? How do you cover this story?
I think it's very important to keep tab on everybody right now, all the stakeholders, the government, of course, the election commission, the Gen Z spokespersons, the faces that have come out, um, but also the political parties. And also there are other groups that have, raised their voices during this protest, like people who support monarchy are
Mm.
also,
Oh,
raising their voices. So I think it's a very challenging time for us
mm,
because, we're already a month in. March is not that far away. The elections are not that far away. Uh, Kind of right now, the elections look like the light at the end of the tunnel, but it is also very scary part because we don't know how the political parties will react to the call to contest in the elections right now, and how if the old leaders, if they want to make a comeback, how the Gen Z will react. Right now, the Gen Z protesters are demanding arrests, that the former prime minister and home minister be arrested. They're putting that forth very strongly. Uh, of course, it will also be important to see how the government will react to the demands of the Gen Z protesters and how they will stick to the democratic process and follow the law of the land, because you can't say yes to everything the Gen Zs are, and also the group is also very divided. So yeah, it's going to be a challenging time for us, and we will be speaking with all stakeholders involved um, in the process.
Rajneesh, I'll give you the last word. How are you going to be covering this? Who are you going to be speaking to?
Uh, yes, thanks, Eric. Like before that, I just want to go to the question on the safety.
Yeah.
On the third day, like I was covering the protest, like we did have this, security guy with us, like was actually helping us with like that's a personal security arrangement we had to go along with us. So I think that was quite easy for me to go around and to film and to take pictures. So I would really suggest to have at least two people to go when you're covering the protest, and if it's possible to have a personal security with you who will actually oversee and look at and do the security assessment. I think that's quite important, and never cover the protest alone. If you're doing video, if you're doing protest, just try to go with a producer or someone with you, so that person could sense the kind of like a situation out there. That's what I want to suggest.
And
And
for video, Rajneesh, for video journalists, you always have to have somebody behind you who
true, true,
knows
true,
what's
true.
going on at the back.
Exactly. I was actually interviewing a guy, like one of my former colleague who was shot with a rubber bullet, and he actually was not, accompanied, and was not somebody behind him. I think that was one of the
Mm.
reasons why he was shot with a rubber bullet. So I think it's quite important we care about the safety, and as an editor, like we always need to do risk assessment of our reporters when they're going there, like how different ways of doing risk assessment. But I think that's quite important. And coming back to your question, I know we're running out of time. Like what's uncovering, what's the story that we are working. I think the stories are not over. We only saw the superficial stories that came out. I think the in-depth, the investigative stories are yet to be uncovered, especially like what exactly happened in the first day, where behind it, how it was happening, like a lot of like investigations, including OSINT and other ways of doing is still to be done. I think the major stories are yet to be done, and also the second day, like what happened, how it happened, happen, and how was it possible to make everything burn on the second day? I think that bigger stories are there, and I think there's a quite interesting and important stories. And what happens now? Like, how are we really heading towards the election? I think it's quite important, and I hope the international media gives space to the stories from Nepal, which I've been always struggling, and I've been always questioning the editors, the assignment editors, and this, I think this is the right time to say is that, like, please give space to the protest that's happening in Nepal, to the stories that's happening. And it's not just the Everest, like how the international outlets is like Everest is only the sexy and only the story out here, but there are stories, that there are organic, genuine stories that needs to be covered, and that space should be given. And that's what I think, Eric.
And just to finish, there's a question: will this Gen Z generation play a political role? I mean, they had the protests, too many people died, but will they, at the end of the day, next March, have any role, do you think? Can they organize that? I mean, it was the young people have traditionally always obviously revolted against the established order, but I mean, come next year, I mean, do you think the Gen Z movement will coalesce into a political movement, or is it just a kind of expression of we're all fed up and we're gonna, but is it going to actually produce results at the ballot box in the elections?
That's a great question, Eric. Like, my question to all the Gen Z leaders, it has been always like, why did you select like a leader, the prime minister who is quite old? Like, that has been my question to the Gen Z
Not
leaders.
that
And
old, just the same age as me.
not
I'm
putting
just
you at
kidding.
the center, but like, yeah, that's what I've been asking the Gen Z leaders. Like, you guys have been saying like you're doing protests and organizing all those things, but why are you selecting? Like, if you look at the cabinet, everyone is like, it's not Gen Z, and
Yeah,
so
these old
so
people.
so yeah. So what they say is that, what they've been saying is that their actually their demand, their values, and their, the mission for the protest is being reflected in these people, and these people who are being right now, who are leading the government, is actually will they think they will actually take those values, those aspirations, those demands on the table, and they will implement those. So that has been the their say on these things. On your question, like whether they will form a political party, how these things will move ahead. So it's quite difficult to predict at the moment, to say like what's happening. But one of the options, and one of the possibilities, what I see talking with the Gen Z leaders and these people, is that they are definitely coming to be organized. If and then it looks there will be contesting in the upcoming election, and they are going to take part in this. But we're not sure who is going to lead the party, whether the Gen Z's favorite, Balin Shah, who is the mayor of the Kathmandu metropolitan city, and he has been one of the favorite leaders of them. He said like he will not come as the interim prime minister. That's what he said. Whether he will open a political party, whether he will lead it, we are not yet sure. But it looks as the possibility, one of the possibilities is that they will form a political party and contest in the election. Eric.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I think our time is up. Very interesting. I could keep talking about it. So let's reconvene around the time of the election, Jill. So thanks, Pavan, Rajneesh, and Prabesh. Very interesting. And we've got to keep it in the international headlines. It's a fascinating story. And following on from Nepal, there was this Gen Z revolt in Morocco. So it's kind of a quite different, but still kind of connected as a sort of a trend. So, okay, Jill, I'm gonna hand over to you to finish.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric, and thank you, Rajneesh, Pavan, and Pradesh for sharing. It's a great session. So all the best for the next coming weeks and month in Nepal, and definitely we'll be watching, and I really hope the international media will also relay the stories. And yeah, I fully agree that there are many interesting stories in Nepal beyond Everest. So So we'll be following that. Thanks again, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Jill, for organizing it.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.